All right, welcome to the show, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with today's virtual field trip. If this is your first experience on a Learn Around the World virtual field trip, you can interact with the show in several ways. Just really quickly, no matter if you're watching from the outside today, meaning you're not on camera, or you're one of our on-camera guest classrooms, you can always send in your text questions. We encourage you to do so early and often. You can do that in two ways. One way is you can use the Q&A app that's built right into your Zoom window that you see at the bottom of your screen. The other way is you can send in your text questions to hashtag GEOshow if you are on Twitter. So please only use the hashtag GEOshow. If you @ me, I will not see it. I am only following this thread right here, the hashtag GEOshow. We also use Kahoot here on the GEOshow, so get logged in and play along using Kahoot on any web browser or any device. Just go to kahoot.it, enter in today's game pin, which is 6667802. And pay attention. If you win today's Geo quiz, you'll get a postcard from me, GOB, from the Learn Around the World Studios. Also, if you stump me on any questions, great. You're asking fantastic questions. I just want to make sure I get you a accurate answer. If I don't have the answer right here live for you, I don't know every single thing there is to know about Semana Santa in Guatemala, but I will do my best to answer all your questions or research those answers for you after the show. All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started with today's program, but first I want to know, explorers, are you guys ready?
Talk it up so they can hear you.
All right. Welcome, all explorers. You're now watching the GEOshow, and the title of today's program is Semana Santa, Holy Week in Guatemala. Brought to you by Learn Around the World. We're kicking off today's show with a survey question using Kahoot. The way we use Kahoot on the GEOshow is you only get 10 seconds, so there's not a lot of time to answer, and you must look up at the screen where you see me at, and that is the only place you're going to see the questions and the answers. If you've never used Kahoot before, you will only see color-coded buttons on your devices, so you must look up at the screen to see the questions. Don't worry, these first few are just survey questions. They are not worth points. We'll award points in our quiz at the end of the show. Here we go, guys. First question is, where is Guatemala? We're going to Guatemala on a virtual field trip. Where is it? What region? Is it in red South America, blue Africa, yellow Central America, or green Europe? What do you guys think? All right, so lots of people have chosen South America, but it's actually in Central America, which is technically North America, but we like to call it Central America to break it up a little bit more. And let's find out exactly. On the GEOshow, we are a geography-based program. That means location matters, explorers. So let's find out exactly where is Guatemala. But if we spin our big blue ball around, we are going to focus in onto Central America. So as we zoom in, we're going to freeze it right here just to point out what countries are surrounding Guatemala. So Guatemala is highlighted in red for all of you. The country to the north of Guatemala, so this large country up here is Mexico. Just to the east of Guatemala is Belize in this circle. Then we have Honduras down to the southeast and El Salvador below Honduras. So those are the bordering countries to Guatemala. We are headed to southern Guatemala today to a city called Antigua. Antigua used to be the capital city of Guatemala, but it's not any longer today. Today, the capital city is Guatemala City. We'll talk about why it's not the capital any longer as well. All right, so as we focus in here, this is the largest Semana Santa celebration in the Western Hemisphere in the Americas. And as you can see, the city itself is surrounded by volcanoes, as we're going to learn, is one of the reasons why the capital was moved from here. So what is this Semana Santa stuff we're talking about? If you're not familiar, Semana Santa means Holy Week in Spanish. And Holy Week, if you're wondering what Holy Week it is, in the Christian religion, the week before Easter is referred to as Holy Week. And especially in the Catholic version of the Christian religion is what we're going to focus on today. And this year it happened from March 25th to April 1st. That was just last week. And in the Catholic terminology, they called that Sunday before Easter Sunday is Palm Sunday, and it ends on Easter, which is Easter Sunday. All right, so before we get started and head down to Antigua and see how they celebrate Semana Santa here and why it's so special here, we do want to introduce, we have a couple of on-camera classrooms with us today. First up, we have Mrs. Goodrich's fifth graders from Carlisle, Arkansas. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hi!
All right, and do we have anyone in your class that has a fun fact about Guatemala you would like to share?
So yes. Yes, we do.
Okay, go for it.
Semana,
You gotta be loud.
Semana Santa is an Easter celebration.
Right. So it ends on Easter, and as we just defined it, it's a little bit larger than Easter. So and in fact, it's really larger than Semana Santa. So we're just going to focus on Semana Santa today, which is the peak of the celebration. But technically, it happens all throughout Lent. And if you're not familiar, something that the Catholic version of Christianity focuses on more than, say, other aspects of Christianity. But Lent is the 40 days that leads up to Easter. And celebrations happen all throughout Lent in Antigua, Guatemala, but the largest of these celebrations happen during Holy Week and those couple of days right before Easter, which is what we're going to focus on today. All right, next up we have Mrs. Remel's fifth graders from Independence, Missouri. Welcome to the show, guys. All right, and do we have any fun facts from your classroom today?
Yes, we do.
My name is Peyton. The most population of Guatemala today is more than 14 million people. Guatemala is the second most populated country in both South and Central America.
All right. So population-wise, we have lots of people in Guatemala, and then we're going to talk about population a lot today because it fluctuates a lot in the city of Antigua during Holy Week, and we'll learn more about that. So thank you for everyone that shared those fun facts. We love learning from you guys. We do want to give shout-outs as well to we have more classrooms that are just not on camera with us today. First shout-out today is going to St. Thomas the Apostle School in Illinois. Big shout out to you guys watching as well. But let's get started and let's celebrate Semana Santa, which happened last week in Antigua. So let's introduce Antigua a little bit further. Antigua is a beautiful colonial city. It was started or founded by Spanish conquistadors in the 1500s, and it was the capital all the way up until 1773. And the reason is because remember those volcanoes I showed you that are surrounding the city? I'll show you those again. But because of those volcanoes and the high activity of earthquakes as well, the capital city was moved in 1773 to Guatemala City because of a devastating earthquake. Speaking of populations, as we just learned about the country's population, what about the city of Antigua? The city of Antigua has around somewhere between 46,000 between the last census to 50,000 people or so lives there year round. But during Holy Week, during the week before Easter, that balloons up to well over 1 million people. So we have this very small city that has 20 times the number of people there during Semana Santa. So because of that, it's almost impossible to find a hotel room if you don't have one booked. You can't just show up. There's not going to be anywhere to stay. I met families that were there from El Salvador. This is their family vacation they take every year. So it's a very, very popular celebration for Semana Santa. And one of the reasons, as we're about to learn, is that it's a very beautiful city with beautiful scenery around it, i.e. volcanoes. And because of that, there's a lot of great pictures you can take during Semana Santa. And because of the internet and travel blogs, it's become a really big travel destination during this time of Semana Santa. So let's check it out. So the city of Antigua, again, is surrounded by 3 volcanoes. So let me freeze it right here. So this is Volcan Acatenango right here, Volcan Fuego. Volcan Fuego is very active. Actually saw it erupting when I was here during Semana Santa. It has lots of small eruptions. And then just right by the city, we have Volcan Agua. And Volcan Agua is you can see it in almost every street you're in if it lines up perpendicular to the volcano. When you're walking around on the streets, which makes it so beautiful and provides lots of opportunities for pictures. All right, so as we can see, lots and lots of people here. There's over 1 million people here during Semana Santa. And one of the cool things about colonial cities that were built by the Spanish in throughout Latin America is the importance of the town square. So it's they have these very nice squares, and the weather here is warm and beautiful. This is at the end of the dry season, so good weather when you're down here during Semana Santa. And this is a place where you can come and get street food and buy souvenirs in many of these town squares. All right, so as we learned earlier, it's not just Semana Santa, but all throughout Lent. So as soon as Lent starts, the city is decorated. As we can see, banners hanging up from the overlooks or the balconies of the streets here. If you notice about the buildings, you won't see any buildings really over 2 stories high because of the prevalence of earthquakes in this city. And when we look down at the streets, we see these beautiful cobblestone streets that they still have in the city. And as we watch this cart go by, and as we're going to learn about something called alfombras, which means carpets. These alfombras are built in the middle of these cobblestone streets. If you look at the buildings in the background, they're very colorful. So you have these colorful buildings, these cobblestone streets, you have volcanoes in the background. Very, very picturesque location for this celebration. When you walk around the city today, again, the town square is a popular place, but many of the buildings and old cathedrals are still original that were built during the colonial times from the Spanish. And that old architecture is really beautiful. Now, remember in 1773, I said there's a gigantic earthquake here. Many of the cathedrals toppled in or caved in, and the city was ultimately abandoned for a number of years until people started moving back here. And you can still see the leftovers in some of these old cathedrals where the roofs collapsed in or caved in on themselves. Which is definitely one of the popular activities, is to go around and see these old cathedrals. And I just want to show you the sidewalks are not very big. So these are cobblestone streets, little tiny sidewalks. And that's going to be important when you see how many people are there to observe these processions that occur. One other thing I want to note about current day Antigua is they've really kept the city looking beautiful and looking, having that old colonial feel to it, the old architecture style to it. And even with modern businesses that have come to the city, like McDonald's or Little Caesars Pizza, there's very strict building permits that makes them build in ways that they have to use certain colors. And this improves the overall aesthetic of the city, in my opinion. Even when you think about Domino's, it has that bright blue color typically. They don't use that here in Antigua, which I really like. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start learning about the processions. And so this is one of the major things that happens during the celebrations. And again, it's not only happening during Semana Santa, the Holy Week, but also throughout Lent, all throughout Lent. We're going to see mostly adults today, but kids, they have their own special processions that are where you'll see kids carrying floats, but that happens earlier during Lent. Now, where did this tradition come from, these processions that we're about to see? Well, the Spanish brought them over with them from Spain, just like they brought this religion with them, the religion of Christianity from Spain to Guatemala, and they brought that with them in the 1520s. These brotherhoods or sisterhoods are what runs these processions. So these volunteers, sometimes these brotherhoods have upwards of 2,500 to 3,000 volunteers. Each person pays a small fee to be a part of the brotherhood or sisterhood, and that helps fund, as we're going to see, there's a band and all sorts of things that are associated with the procession, and that helps raise money for that as well. Now, remember that earthquake I said in 1773? These processions were halted for a number of years and started back up in 1808, and they've been going every year since then. All right, which brings us to another survey question before we participate in a procession? And that question using Kahoots is going to be, how many religious celebrations happen in Antigua throughout Lent? All right, it's actually over 50, so around 60 or so celebrations. So these include tabernacles, these include visuals and processions. So all sorts of giant religious celebrations happen all throughout Lent, over 60 major ones. And we're going to view a few of them now that happened last week, or the style that happened last week. The schedule for Semana Santa is one major procession, and it doesn't seem like it. You're like, hey, there's only one. Why is that major? These things last for some of them over 12 hours. They march these processions around the streets of Antigua. There's major visuals during Holy Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And then it really starts to ramp up. If you guys know the story of Jesus before he died on the cross in the Christian religion, then you have the Last Supper and one major procession that happens on Thursday. Good Friday, they really ramp it up. They have something called the Judgment. So at midnight on Thursday night, so that would be Friday morning, 12 o'clock a.m., they have the Judgment. So they dress up as Roman soldiers, and they go out in the town squares and they call out for Jesus. And then they have three major processions on Good Friday, three major ones on Saturday, and two on Resurrection Sunday or Easter. Okay, so what do those processions look like? Well, let's check it out. So remember I said some of them during Judgment, also during these processions. So they dress up like Roman soldiers. Some of the men from the Brotherhood do. And so the one that we are watching now is in the storyline of Jesus, is when he was marched through the streets carrying the cross. And that's what we're going to see when the major float comes by. I do want to point out right here, if you look behind on the street, behind the Roman soldiers, you see that beautiful carpet. These are called alfombras. We're going to learn more about these. But if you notice, no one steps on them until the main float comes through, and they will step on them.
Vamos, señores, avancemos. Vénganse, vénganse.
We see this major float coming up. The typical structure of these processions is they'll have one major float. These are all carried by hand. These are not, there's no cars or trucks pulling these. So these are people that are carrying these. That's why it takes so many people. Remember, I said some of these brotherhoods are over 2,000 people strong, and many of them are marching by, partly because they have to take turns carrying these things. They're very heavy, and some of them weigh over a couple of tons and over 10 meters long. As I said, this one has Jesus on it. If you'll notice that there's only men carrying these, the women, so the sisterhoods, carry typically the Virgin Mary, or Jesus's mother. after the brotherhood goes through, the sisterhood follows, and they come through carrying the Virgin Mary. All right, and what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at a different procession. So remember, there are many of these going on throughout Semana Santa and all throughout Lent, and each one of them tells a different story. And the one that we're going to view now happens in the storyline after Jesus has already died on the cross and they're taking his body away from there. So he's going to come by, and we're going to see, if you notice, the robes that they're wearing. They're no longer wearing purple robes. They're going to be wearing black robes. People are in mourning, and you're going to see lots more incense burning, lots more candles from observers that are watching these processions go by. And let's see what one of the nighttime ones look like. And again, these will start, guys, in the evening, and they'll march all the way through 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. Some of these over 12 hours. So there's lots of, we pointed out a couple of jobs. These floats are being carried by hand. There are people acting or playing the parts of Roman soldiers. There are people that are marching down. I don't know if you noticed, I should have pointed it out for you, but they're carrying ropes on the side that keeps people separated, that are observers. And then we have people that are carrying these incense burners, and these burners have to burn. And so you also have people walking around that are burning new charcoal and adding these to the incense burners, because people are walking around. Again, this procession lasted for around 12 hours or so. So you have to keep refilling these incense burners. So there's many different jobs and duties to make these things happen. So if you notice, this gentleman, he's carrying a big wooden pole, and these have a special purpose as well, because when we notice, this float that's getting marched by is too tall to fit under the power line. So if you look behind the float right here, here's one of those poles. So several people are walking alongside of this float to lift up the power lines with these wooden poles, so the float can fit underneath the power lines. So it's pretty, it's an important role or important job. So I just want to point out here is remember these weigh a couple tons, right? So they're very, very heavy. And you can see here that there's cutouts into the wood. There are shoulder grooves. So this is so people's shoulder fits more comfortably in there. And then there's padding as well on these arcs in the wood. Some people ask me, you know, do the kids help not carrying with the adults? Because if you notice, most adults are going to be around 5.5, 6 feet tall, possibly. And if you are a younger person and you're only around 3.5 feet tall, then your shoulder's not going to be tall enough to help carry these floats to begin with. There are separate children processions that happen, but those happen before or earlier in Lent. So these bands are really interesting to talk about as well, because the whole tradition of these processions in Antigua has really grown over the years. Remember, there's over 1 million people coming to the city during this week. Lots of people are coming. That means they're spending lots of money here. And so it's very big for the tourism industry, for selling hotel rooms, for restaurants. And because of that, these processions have gotten bigger and bigger and grander, the more popular it's become. And over the last couple of decades or so, these bands have been added. These are not traditional, where 100 years ago, they wouldn't have a band. What's really neat about the band is it helps to cover up the sound as well to this generator. So if you are wondering how that float was lit up with all those lights, well, this generator is pulled around town for 12 hours behind it with these big gas tanks. And you see those cables running from its forward. It's running all the way up to the float. And that's how they are powering those lights. All right, so people will follow along if they are switching out roles, taking breaks, jumping back in. It can be family members, also concession vendors that are selling souvenirs as well. All right, so we're going to go ahead and open up for some questions. If you have any questions, you're sending in your text questions, make sure you get them sent in to the Q&A app on the bottom of your window, or utilize hashtag GEOshow over on Twitter. We're going to start off with, let's start in Missouri this time. Do you guys have a question for us of anything that we've seen so far?
Julia, do you want to ask about purple robes? Okay. Sorry, just a second.
Hi, I'm Julia, and I was wondering what the purple robes represent when the men wear the purple robes.
When do they?
What do they represent?
What they represent.
What they represent. That's a tradition that has come from Spain. If you look at some of the Semana Santa processions, what's really unique about Antigua is the alfombras, which we're really going to get into in our next section. But the robes is a tradition that came from Spain. Sometimes the colors, I'm not super well in depth of like what the colors, why certain locations use certain colors. In Antigua, purple seems to be the color. If you look at some of the celebrations in Spain, for example, sometimes they're red or more white. And then in Antigua, what happens in the storyline of Jesus, they have the purple for before Jesus dies, and then the black robes they wear after Jesus dies. All right, let's go over to Mrs. Goodrich's classroom. Do you guys have a question for us?
Real loud.
How long does the parade last?
Yeah, that's great. Some of them are over 12 hours. So some of them Right. So some of them will start at 11 a.m. and will finish at midnight. Some of them will start in the late afternoon and will go all the way through until 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning time. So these things are happening, and because they happen 12 to 13 hours, some of these larger ones. And when we see on Good Friday and Saturday as well, but Saturday before Easter, when you have 3 of those 12-hour processions going on throughout the city, some of them are going on at the exact same time. So maybe there's 2 of them going on at the same time throughout the city. So yeah, there's a lot going on that they're snaking all throughout the city. I should do it this way. So they're just snaking through all of the streets and side streets throughout the city. So yeah, so these things are really long. Great questions there. Let's see. We'll check in over on. Don't see anything on Twitter yet. Let's go back to Missouri. Let's go ahead and do 2 with you guys. We'll come right back to you guys in Mrs. Goodrich's classroom as well. Okay, go for it.
Come on.
That's all right. So as he's coming up, I do want to give out another shout out today, and let's go to Bald Knob Schools in Arkansas. Big shout out to you guys as well. All right, let's go back to Mrs. Remo's classroom. Go for it.
What do they do to the floats when they're done?
When they're done, some of these floats were created decades ago. So some of them were built in the early 1900s, mid 1900s, the ones that are active today. And I don't know much about the storage of them year round, but I do know they're on display at the cathedral. So each one of these brotherhoods and sisterhoods so each one that we saw, so the 2 separate ones that we just witnessed, those were sponsored by 2 different cathedrals that are located in the city. And so the way it works is they are the ones that are responsible for those floats. So they use it year in and year out. I don't know much about the physical storage of that float. It's going to have to be a big space because these things are large, right? Great question. Let's go back over to Mrs. Goodrich's classroom. Do you have another question?
When did the parade start?
When did the parade start?
Right. So they started in the 1500s when the Spanish brought the Catholic religion with them. They brought this tradition with them from Spain. So as soon as the Spanish arrived in Guatemala, this tradition started in Guatemala as well. Mrs. Roberts' classroom wants to know over in our Q&A, what are the dimensions of the typical floats? They're different. Some of them are larger than others, but the largest ones typically, or the ones that are of Jesus, are going to be over 10 meters long. So some of them 30 feet long. And so yeah, some of them have different weights to them. The one definitely, I don't know exactly how much it weighed, but I can definitely tell you the second one that we saw at night is definitely heavier than the earlier one that we saw. And some of these floats are actually made, when you look at the design of them, and it looks like they have rocks. Some of it is actual material on there. So these are heavy floats. Great questions coming from all around. So one of the other big traditions, and this is something that is highly unique for Guatemala, and especially in Antigua, is the alfombras. So the alfombras means carpets, and these are the carpets that are designed and laid out. So it's not an actual carpet that you roll out. It's one that they actually make right on the streets out of various materials, and they make them these beautiful artwork that just get marched right over. So they make this art that is going to live for a very short period of time, and it just gets destroyed when these processions come and march right over them. So let's look at this unique tradition. How do they build these? What are they making them for? Let's learn all about that. So the alfombras, when you look at them, as we can see here, can be made out of a number of different things, and fruit is actually used in some of these fruits and vegetables. This is one that was out in front of a cathedral. You're typically not going to see one with this much fruit on it that people are going to walk right over. It's typically going to be made out of the other materials. Now, I did see some that were marched over that did include fruits, but not nearly to the extent of what we see here. So this one wasn't actually for walking over. When you look at these alfombras, some of them can take this very long one here. Some of these take hours or half a day to construct. And again, as soon as sometimes they're completing it just very shortly before the procession comes through this street, and they just march right on top of it and it gets destroyed. So, so a lot of work goes into a very short-lived piece of art, which brings us to our last survey question. So you can take this opportunity to go ahead and get logged in, because the next time we get a question on Kahoot, they are going to be worth points. That game pin today is 6667802. And our last survey question of the day is going to be about alfombras. And what do you guys think? Just looking at those pictures so far, what do you think is the foundational material of many of the alfombras? So the base material, do you think it is dirt, cardboard, sawdust, or food? What do you guys think? All right, so it's sawdust, and it's kind of hard to see because it's colored. So the way that they get these vibrant backgrounds on these alfombras is because of its dyed or colored sawdust. So let's take a look at that and how they use this colored sawdust to construct these alfombras. Well, some of the designs, when we look at them, what they're putting on these alfombras, of course, are going to be related to the religion that this holiday is for, so to the Christian religion. But then many of the designs have nothing to do with Christianity. It has to do with the indigenous designs that were already here in Guatemala, which we'll show you some of those. So not only is there sawdust, but the other kind of typical one you'll see is one that's made out of pine needles that we see here. So pine needles and flowers. These, just observing, were very quicker. They were a lot quicker to make than the sawdust ones. Then we have individual flower petals that are used in the construction. Well, you may ask yourself, you see these ribbons that are kind of blowing around. Here's some messages that are written down as well. Well, it was windy the day that I was here. So why is it not blowing everywhere? It's sawdust, right? Well, one of the things they do is they wet it down and they keep it wet. So when they construct these, they use templates. They use wood to help give them a border, and they'll use these sifters. So they'll do a base layer of uncolored sawdust, and then they'll sift the colored sawdust, and this makes the background. And then you can use templates and come back with other colors to make your designs on the alfombras. So that's how they're constructed. What's really neat to talk about is, well, once you make the base, how do you get these designs in the middle? And you'll see people balancing on milk crates out on pieces of wood over these things. And so I saw a number of people almost fall onto their alfombras. And here we see bags and bags of colored sawdust. And here's a great example. We see people wetting these alfombras down. So when you keep them wet, you keep them from blowing away. Look how beautiful this one is. This is a great example of the local culture that was already here, the Maya people. These are Maya designs. So for thousands of years, the Maya people were living here before Spanish even came to this area. And like other places around the world, when we think of like when Christianity spread north into Europe, that's when they incorporated the Christmas tree and Christmas wreaths and the Easter bunny into the Christian religion. Those were pagan beliefs that they brought in that were already to the places, the new areas, the new land that they were spreading to. Same thing happened in the Americas, in all sorts of different countries. But right here in Guatemala, where the indigenous people were Maya people, they already had their own traditions, artwork, and this is a great example of that. These are Maya designs. What's interesting is these designs are very important. You can go to Maya groups. You can tell what villages people come from by the designs that their blouses are made out of. And this young man's job is to wet the flowers and the sawdust to keep them from blowing away. after the procession marches through, so we won't watch the procession again. But as soon as they come through, concession people follow, and then they clean these things right up directly. Seriously, guys, this thing just marched through not even 5 minutes ago. We see the end of it up above. And right then and there, we have big work crews that come through. They sweep everything into big piles, and then a dump truck comes through with a big front end loader behind the dump truck, and they scoop all of this stuff up. So why do they clean it up so fast? Well, remember, there's 3 of these major, this is a very small city, guys. So these 3 major, especially on, say, Good Friday or Good Saturday, when 3 of these are going on throughout the day, 2 of them are going on during the same time. And another one's going to be coming through and not too far along. So people remake these alfombras all over again. So sometimes as soon as they're destroyed and marched over, they go right through it, especially if they're on a popular city that the processions are going to come through multiple times. So the tools that you need to make these are the templates and the colored sawdust are going to be your main materials. People will mark them out beforehand. Look here, I love to show you how thick these are. I mean, they're around 3 inches to 2.5 inches thick of sawdust. So they're pretty tall. When they construct these, families get involved, youth groups get involved. It really is a community event to make these alfombras. Local streets where you live, you'll maybe make them with your neighbors, and the templates and the different designs that you want to make on yours. And then when they clean it up, what's really neat about after these work crews come through with the cobblestone streets, the sawdust kind of gets down into the cracks and the grooves of the cobblestone. So it doesn't just blow away. It actually will stay for either a few days or a few weeks, depending on when the next rain is, really, considering this is towards the tail end of the dry season, typically in Guatemala. All right, so let's go ahead and open it back up for questions about alfombras or anything so far. Let's start this time. Let's go to Arkansas first. Do we have any questions from you guys?
I don't think we do.
Okay, what about over in Missouri?
Hi, my name is Isabella, and I wanted to ask what do they eat at that time?
What? I'm sorry, can you one more time?
What do they eat at that time?
What do they eat? So during, so there's lots of street food throughout the city during this time. I am not aware of any traditional meals as far as anything specific for Semana Santa, which they do have for Christmas time. But a traditional dish in Guatemala, traditional cuisine is going to be heavy on maize or corn, chilies, black beans. These are going to be food staples of the cuisine that they have. All right, let's go ahead and launch our Geo quiz. And because we had a food question, if you have time to stick around after our Geo quiz, feel free to head out if you have to go. But if you have time to stick around, I'll show you a little bit of street food that is available during these celebrations in Antigua, in Guatemala. All right, so again, every question from here on out is worth points. So make it count. The quicker you answer correctly, of course, the more points you are awarded. All right, first question. What country is Antigua in? Is it red, Mexico, blue, Spain, yellow, El Salvador, or green, Guatemala? All right, it is in Guatemala. Magic Cat jumps out to the lead. Great job, Magic Cat. Semana Santa means... Is it red Easter, blue Good Friday, yellow Holy Week, or green Palm Sunday? All right, it is Holy Week, Holy Week. So Easter, Good Friday, and Palm Sunday are included in Semana Santa. Semana Santa is the entire Holy Week. All right, Wonder Cheetah takes the lead. Great job. What are the beautiful carpets made of sawdust, pine needles, and flowers called? Hermanidades red or Alfombras blue? Okay, Alfombras. Okay, Wonder Cheetah still in the lead, followed by Witty Cheetah. Those cheetahs are fast, I tell you what. All right, women and men usually carry the floats together. Is that blue true or red false? All right, false. So the men typically carry the ones with Jesus, and the women typically carry the ones with the Virgin Mary or Mother Mary. All right, Wonder Cheetah still in the lead. What country did the procession tradition come from? Was it red Spain, blue Mexico, yellow England, or green El Salvador? All right, it was Spain. All right, and today's winner is dun 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 dun. Daring Unicorn came from behind for the win. Congratulations to Daring Unicorn. If you are Daring Unicorn's teacher, please send me your school address. And you can do that in one place only, and that's over at learnaroundtheworld.com/prize. learnaroundtheworld.com/prize. That URL is located at the bottom of your screen right there. All right, give me your school address and we'll get that snail mail sent out. And until next time, if you have to run, have a great day. It's a great big world out there, so keep exploring. If you have time to stick around with us, we are going to show you some street food, and then I'll open it up for some bonus rounds of questions for as long as you guys got. All right, so we'll go ahead and open it up or start our street food that we're going to look at here. So this is one of those major squares, town squares that we're talking about. This was located in Antigua, and which many of the street food vendors were located. And let's check out what is available during Semana Santa. So I can't even. All right, so when we start looking at some of this street food, and there was a lot of it here, and it was very hot. So if it's kind of hard to see, sorry, it's hard to get good shots with the low lights here during nighttime, but it was very hot. There's umbrellas above our heads. It's very hot in this part of the world, and with all of the cooking and grills going on, it was just trapping that heat in there. All right, so when we start looking at some of the foods that we find that are available, to our left, we're going to see some pizza. Of course, you can find pizza all over the world today and on streets. So definitely had some pizza available in Antigua. We also had corn. So you can't talk about this part of the world where corn comes from in Mesoamerica or Central America. And so corn is a very, very important staple. Candy stands, all sorts of different kinds of candy. And I'm not a big sweet tooth, so I did not get any. This is what I'm talking about. So these are handmade tortillas. We see this lady making here, and they're a little bit different. So if you guys are used to Mexican style tortillas, those tend to be a little bit thinner. These handmade ones, these Maya style tortillas, typically are really thick that you find here. I really love them. And you can see these tortas that are available as well, which are sandwiches. And then we see some of those handmade tortillas happening. As we go down and look at some of our other foods, there were some papa fritas earlier, which are potatoes. And right behind here, there was a bunch of people earlier. You saw on the TV screen that there was a football match. And that's right, I said football, guys. If you are outside of the U.S., by the way, soccer is football. So if you guys are ever traveling anywhere and if you want to talk about American football, you need to specify American football, because if you say football in any other part of the world, they're going to be talking about soccer. And as you would have it, during this night was a Guatemala versus USA World Cup qualifying match. So it was a huge match. Guatemala actually won this match, so a lot of people were very happy. But it was kind of actually hard walking around in this street food section, because you see all these people just standing around there watching the TVs, watching the match that is going on. And this is right by a cathedral. So that's a cathedral behind us. So in the town square, right beside this large cathedral, is where many of these food stands are located. And it's really hard to move around. You can kind of see how crowded it is.
Wow, so it's tight.
It is tight there. All right, so that's just a little bit about the street food that we found available in Antigua. Let's go back to Missouri. Do you guys have another question?
Yeah, James.
Why are the fruits and vegetables only offered to the saints and not to everyone?
Why are they only offered to the saints?
Yeah.
Right. So I'll be honest, I don't know a lot about the fruits and vegetables designated just for the saints. I will say that if I have to make a guess, which I'll see if I can research it and find a better answer for you on Flipgrid. But typically you are offering up, you know, you're sacrificing or offering something better. Often people ask, you know, this happens. Also, keep in mind, this happens during or throughout Lent. So a lot of people wonder sometimes, why are they carrying these heavy things? Part of what goes on with the Catholic religion during Lent is kind of what's been built into these processions is you're really meant to go through suffering. You're meant to give up something. Today, modern, what kind of happens in a lot of modern societies is people give up, oh, I'm going to give up video games for 40 days, or I'm going to give up eating chocolate for 40 days. But the whole idea is it goes back, if you're familiar with the Christian religion, when Jesus was in the desert suffering for a period of time. So many people will fast during this time. They'll take one thing or a few things out of their diet, or it's the whole idea is you're supposed to go through a bit of suffering during this time. And so you're giving up things. You're giving up things that you would typically have the rest of the year as well. And I don't, probably not a direct answer for that, but it gives you a little bit better idea about the idea of Lent in Semana Santa. Let's go over to Arkansas. Do you guys have a question for us?
No, we don't. No, we don't.
All right, let's go back over to Missouri. Do you guys have another question?
Why don't you share your fun fact? Yeah, she has a fun fact that she didn't get to share.
All right, go for it.
Good word. Porridge is a type of dessert traditionally enjoyed during the porridge main ingredient is a slice of bread to complete it. You dip an egg and fry it in a pan. Some say it's similar to French toast.
Oh, those sound like French toast. I don't know about you guys. I love French toast. All right, guys. So thank you for sharing. I always love learning from you guys as well. And that's the beauty about this. We can all learn from each other from all of our research. Okay, so great. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on today's virtual field trip. We're going to go ahead and head out. Until next time, remember, it's a great big world out there. All kinds of beautiful traditions, celebrations all around the world. Get out there, go see them. Until next time, I'm GOB. You've been watching the Geo Show. Bye, guys.